You say the war is simply an obscenity, a depraved act by weak and miserable men.
Including all of us, including myself,
Well,
including that's the next sentence, same sentence.
Sure, because you count everybody in the company of the guilty.
I think that's true in this case.
Yeah, but
see, one of the points I was
trying... This is a sense of theological observation, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Because as somebody points out, if everybody's guilty of everything, then nobody's guilty of anything.
No, I don't, no, I don't believe that. See, I think the point that I'm trying to make, and I think ought to be made, is that the real, at least to me, I say this elsewhere in the book, what seems to me a very, in a sense, terrifying aspect of our society and other societies is the equanimity and the detachment with which sane, reasonable, sensible people can observe such events. I think that's more terrifying than the occasional Hitler or LeMay or other that crops up. These people would not be able to operate were it not for this apathy and equanimity. And therefore I think that it's, in some sense, the sane and reasonable and tolerant people who share a very serious burden of guilt that they very easily throw on the shoulders of others who seem more extreme and more violent.
Let me ask you this. If, in fact, your concern is to communicate your moral concern, to what extent have you spent a time thinking about your techniques? Now, I say this seriously because it is probably true that under certain circumstances, the communication of one's own indignation and fury and restraint is best communicated emotionally, i.e. to one's own satisfaction, by screaming and yelling. Right. But if it becomes observable that this doesn't bring people around, then you've got to consider the problem of communication, which becomes a moral problem, just as you would consent to argue Auschwitz or Buchenwald with somebody if there was a chance of dissipating something of the sort. Now, if you have given that problem any thought, how come that you end up saying, as you do in your book, that Senator Mike Mansfield is, quote, the kind of man who is the terror of our age?
Well, let me put that in its context as well. What I say is, I believe that, and what I say is that Senator Mansfield is an American intellectual in the best sense, a sane, reasonable, scholarly man, the kind of man who is the terror of our age. And that's essentially what I was saying before. I think that the terror of our age is the
mass man,
the sane, responsible, serious, quiet man who watches these things unfold and doesn't react to them. I include myself in that, as I tried to make clear in the earlier statements.
Well, if, put it this way, your counsel is surely a counsel of despair if, on the one hand, you accost us with your own relative moral superiority, and yet end up despising yourself, appealing to scrupulosity for your own shortcomings. I mean, this makes things pretty.
Not really. For one thing, I don't feel any relative moral superiority, and I tried, maybe failed, but I tried very hard to express that in the book. That I said somewhere in the beginning that if there is any tone of self-righteousness or anything like that, it's unintended and certainly undeserved, and I mean that very much. See, I mean, after all, given the feelings that I have, which I've just expressed, and which you perceive, I should be doing really strong things, which I don't think I am doing. So there's no sense of moral superiority, and I'm not interested in simply, throwing blame around or giving people marks. I think that the beginning of wisdom in this case is to recognize something about what we stand for in the world, what we're doing in the world. And I think when we do recognize that, we will feel an enormous sense of guilt. And I say somewhere in there that one should be very careful not to let confessions of guilt overcome the possibility of action. I say that confessions of guilt can be very good therapy, as they can, as is well known. They're also very good preventative to action. And I think one should be very wary of that.